What's a little protest among friends? It'll only get you 3.5 years. All this and more on the Self-Evident Podcast. Welcome to the Self-Evident Podcast.
Up?
You got Mike. You got Massey.
We're back.
We're back.
The
We're here.
tandem is back.
Everybody's
the
going,
dynamic
"Oh,
duo
crap."
is back. The Sultans of SWAT are back. The Kings of Swings are back.
There we go. Name that reference. Not you, them. I can't remember what the song
Oh, the Sultan of SWAT. Yeah, Sultan of SWAT.
Yeah.
That's Babe Ruth, dude.
Is that who it was?
Mm-hmm. Sultan of SWAT.
There you go. See?
So consider us the Babe Ruths of
low-tier podcasting.
I'm prophesying that our podcast is the best. So, guys, welcome to Self-Evident Podcast. Mike is here. Thank you, Jesus, because we need Mike. My wife, though, did amazing last podcast. She did so good. Everybody tells me she's such a natural. It's like, well, I can't get her to do more than one podcast every 2 months because it's just not her shtick. But, like, that's cool. And maybe she might. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But, again, you're the one opening. What am I doing?
Huh?
No, you do.
No, go for it. No, it's all you. No, that's fine. No, I've got work to do in the back if you want to go ahead and roll this. I'm just giving him crap. All right. Do not forget to go to theselfevidenttruth.com. Yeah. Get yourself some merch.
Yeah.
And is the pre-sale stuff up on the website yet or no?
The pre-sale of the book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
We've got, check it out. Because we know what's going on.
Right.
Obviously. Anyways, we've got all kinds of resources. We've got merch. We got shirts. We got all of that stuff. Get yourself some of that.
And we have that Burgers in America thing this Thursday.
That's
so
right.
Go on our
You wanna
website.
pitch that?
Yeah. So we have a little gathering going on. Small. If you guys want to be a part of it, you can. It's just kind of showing some sneak peek vision for the future here in 2025. Also, just to get to know the ministry. So it's here in Port St. Lucie. If you guys haven't signed up, go to theselfevidenttruth.com. And you guys can sign up. It's called Burgers in America, and we'd love to have you there. It's about we're already over halfway full. It was a small gathering anyway, so if you guys want to sign up, you guys can do that. And you guys will find out some really cool stuff about SE and what we're doing moving forward, and what really God put on our hearts for the future here and what we're doing. So it's gonna be fun.
All right. Let's get into this. Why not?
So yeah. This is a contentious. It's not contentious to the conservative world. They're all like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. But it was contentious when you find out a lot of information. I'm not against her speaking, this lady we're about to talk about.
Right.
But it's a lot.
Yeah, there's more to it than just
Meets the eye.
Mom of Toddler gets thrown in jail for 3.5 years. Now,
for freedom of speech.
For exactly, just for saying abortion is wrong. That's not exactly what happened. And we're reserving judgment. I've got some interesting parts at the end of this of different perspectives, right? And we'll get into that. But what happened? Bevelyn Beatty Williams was given 41 months for blocking the entrance to a Planned Parenthood clinic in Lower Manhattan in June 2020. Now, that's the line that a lot of people ran with. All she was doing was blocking the entrance, and they gave her 3.5 years, and she has a child at home, and how dare you do this to her?
Right.
I'm not disagreeing, but I'm not necessarily agreeing at the same time.
Sure. I mean, and two, like, who is for the grotesqueness of abortion? We're more on the abolition side. There should be no abortion. And I know that sounds really, really extreme, but that's where I stand, and we're going to do everything we can to do that. But there comes a point, too, where it's like, okay, it wasn't just one instance here. There's more to the story. And what we should do, and eventually we're going to have to push back on things like this, but I'm talking about against government. But for this specific story, just listen.
Yeah, let's get into this. So the DOJ reports, they themselves, because they'll do press releases about cases and that kind of thing, Bevelyn Beatty Williams was sentenced to 41 months in prison for violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. In June 2020, this is the FACE Act, we'll talk about that in a second, in connection with her interference, including by threats and force, with individuals seeking to obtain and provide lawful reproductive health services at a reproductive health center in Manhattan. Now, notice the language that they want to use for that.
Right.
Government's obviously kind of throwing their little shot in there, right? On June 19, 2020 and June 20, 2020, Williams threatened and used force against patients and staff members at a reproductive health center located in Lower Manhattan and blocked patients and staff members from accessing the health center. In one instance, as captured on video, Williams pressed her body against the door of the health center's patient entrance and refused to move, preventing a healthcare volunteer from entering the health center. Williams purposefully leaned against the door, crushing Victim 1's hand. Victim 1 yelled, "She's crushing my hand," but Williams remained against the door, trapping Victim 1's hand and injuring it. Now, moving down. On the live stream on June 19, 2020, Williams stood within inches of the health center's chief administrative officer and threatened to terrorize this place and warned that, "We're going to terrorize you so good, your business is going to be over, mama." Similarly, Williams stood within inches of a health center security officer and threatened war. Williams also stated that she would act by any means necessary. Now, this is not the first time she has done this type of thing. At clinics across the country, including Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, and Brooklyn, New York. For example, in January 2022, Williams traveled to a health center in Fort Myers, Florida, where she directed other individuals to block health center entrances. So this is kind of her MO. Block the entrances, get in people's faces to keep them from doing what they're doing. Now, the FACE Act, what is this? So this act, and we've talked about this a little bit before.
Can we before we get to that, can we talk about, so there's going to be some of you that say, what's wrong with her doing that? They're killing babies. This is what they're doing. Yeah, and there's a point too where it's like, and this is what I preached on this yesterday. At the time of this taping, this is Monday, so we're filming it today. Recording. I'm a 90s baby. I think there's a point to where you have to analyze before God: is your heart in righteous anger or is it in fleshy anger? You got to know your poison there, right? Like what are you acting out of, right? When you start crushing someone's hand in a door, I think there's something wrong with that. I think it's like, okay, now you're doing maiming physical force. Like, if they have not engaged on you, are you engaging that on them? And then to threaten war and all that.
Terrorize you.
Yeah, any means necessary. You start to cross lines that have not been drawn yet, right? Mm-hmm. We get it. I am totally not for someone killing babies, right? But I also cannot use murder to prevent murder.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's a tricky situation to be in. And I don't know what you feel about that, but it's like there's going to be people who say, what's wrong with her doing that? She needs to stop it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, so take life. Like, in your mentality, at the end is taking life, right? So taking life in order to prevent the taking of life, right? When it's not done to you. It's a tricky place to be.
It's very tricky, and I'm actually going to skip the FACE Act, and you started this.
But we need to talk the FACE Act, though, too. And camera's on me right now.
There you
But I mean, you're talking. I love you. I'm just trying to do the right thing here.
I'm trying to make this work.
I'm just helping him,
giving me 3 different things.
He's talking, and my fat face is on here.
You shot my final segment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Let's
reserve
that.
Let's reserve it to the end then.
Okay.
Because stew on what we just said, and then move on to the FACE Act.
Because in the final segment, what I've got is we take different outlooks, because you're kind of touching into this concept of, okay, what are the different outlooks and how people are perceiving it?
Yeah.
And I'm with you of, man, it becomes a tough topic, because there's, how do you act this out as a Christian?
Yeah.
So we'll hit the FACE Act first, just so you know what it is. So the FACE Act, we covered this before. This is basically, it makes it a civil right for people to get access to a clinic or a medical procedure, which of course they wrap abortion up in that.
Yeah.
So now what they're doing is they're charging all of these pro-life protesters with the FACE Act.
Right. And I was saying, what I was trying to lead into that, I know you covered at the end, but I kind of wanted to precursor what we're talking about. So I didn't want to leave the FACE Act, because I think it's important to cover and what that all means. And I think a lot of people are going to struggle with, when is it time to act?
Right.
In that, you know what I mean? And you cover that, but I was kind of precursoring it. So I didn't mean to jump on that part. But it's like, I know your philosophical mind starts to work, and it gives me direction on things I didn't have before. That's what I love, is like our partnership is, I'm more of a driver, you're more of like, but why are we driving? You know what I mean? Like, you give me the why in a lot of ways. So I love to pick your brain. And a lot of the times when we're doing these podcasts, so you know, we'll both agree on a topic. He'll do a lot of research. I'll do my own research, but we don't discuss our points. So what you're getting is fresh every time. So that's why you'll see him go, oh, I was going to cover that here. And I'm like, okay, I get what he's doing. But I like it because it actually keeps the conversation fresh. You know what I mean? It's not rehearsed lines or anything like that. So,
yeah. And so with this part, so is she justified? You've got a few different options, right? So if true that she was becoming physical, was threatening staff and officers, and purposefully continued to crush someone's hand, then she really did make herself a target for the justice system.
You physically harmed somebody, dude.
And this type of situation is a powder keg. And it gives these judges, these prosecutors, these media types all the ammo they need to say that this pro-life group, they're unhinged.
Right.
Now, we've got issues with this FACE Act, but let's put that aside. Her actions were begging for a government response.
Yeah. You know, like the 501c3 guy in the 90s?
Yeah.
You're kind of like, I get what he was trying to do and putting up billboards and like calling out the president and calling out government, but you're almost like saying, take me in. You know what I mean? Take me into the fray. And so it's like, at that point, you got to wonder, are you really a martyr or were you looking for it?
Are you setting yourself up to be that martyr? And like, I know what will make them react. I'll be blatant and
martyrs don't set out to be martyrs. Martyrs are out for truth and trying to reform something, and they become martyrs by someone saying, I don't agree with you, slaughter, right? But then there comes a point where it's like, is this just, and again, I'm not saying what she stood for was unrighteous. Was this more pride? And you determine yourself. Comment down below. Do you think it's pride? Do you think it's martyrism? Do you know?
And I've got an analogy later in the notes that I think will really put people to test on that. Because some people say, well, yeah, of course. And some people, no, absolutely not. There's a different, well, we'll get to that in a second. But we have seen pro-lifers who have gotten investigated, raided, charged, thrown in prison for truly like praying outside an abortion clinic.
They weren't doing anything wrong.
Right. And those people, some of them were given stiff sentences. You had Lauren Handy, who was given 5 years for 5 years. 5 years for blocking an abortion clinic. Mind you, this abortion clinic was investigated by Congress because the guy was doing partial birth abortions. Thank you. And a staff member had sent 5 bodies of infants to Handy at one point as evidence to what was going on, yet the judge made an example of Handy and gave her 5 years for preventing women from getting abortions for a few hours.
Yeah, that right there is extreme. Standing in front of a door, knowing that seriously, partial birth abortion, that's murder, right?
Right.
Obviously, they've been investigated, and because wickedness prevails, what do you do? Again, this is where it gets really sticky. Yeah. How far do we go with this kind of judgment thing? And there's other friends we have. Cal Zastro up north, he just got some time. I think he's I don't know if it's a year. Well, I can't remember what it is. I'll look it up. But just some friends of mine who they stand outside and preach. That's all they do. They're not like out there trying to prevent or block, but it's really trying to go out and win souls. And again, you can say their methods are wrong, whatever you want to do, but it's like that's freedom of speech. Here, it's like 5 years for exposing partial birth, abortion, and body parts.
Right.
That's where it gets a little hairy. You know what I mean?
And even Nicole Russell of USA Today wrote back in May that the sentence was extreme, right? So you have even people on the other side going, okay, that was extreme.
A little far.
And Russell made sure to say, now, Handy wasn't right in what she was doing, but that's a little far to go 5 years.
Yes.
And here's something that you may get from conservatives, and this is an asterisk. This is one of those different analogies that help us put it in perspective. You may argue, well, it's private property. And that's what the government is really arguing is, look, this is private property and you're keeping people from being able to do a free business or doing business freely on private property.
Yeah.
Now, here's my analogy. So we might not want somebody charged for keeping patrons out of a restaurant. Let's say you have a restaurant or there is a restaurant and people are just like, they want to be patrons, but other people don't like the owners, which we've seen happen in the owner's political view. So now they're protesting and trying to keep people out of that restaurant.
Yeah.
We go, that's private property. You're infringing on somebody's freedom to do business.
Yeah, free exercise.
This is wrong. Free exercise. Now, This is a little bit different. Let's say the restaurant doesn't just serve food, but patrons can bring someone against their will, and the restaurant will turn that person into food. Grotesque, but you might see the actions of the restaurant as falling outside of the private property argument.
Right.
So the private property argument kind of comes with an asterisk on this whole thing because there's a moral situation to this. Now, I'm not justifying her actions or behaviors with these clinics, but we do have to see it from all angles. So first, let's do the judges, prosecutors, pro-abortion crowd. Their position, and I do not believe that the vast majority of people that are defending these clinics and saying you have to let these clinics do what they want, I don't believe necessarily that they're outright like, I want to see how many kids can get killed. What they're talking about is like, no, abortion is a woman's choice. It's access to healthcare. A woman needs this as healthcare.
Yes, they believe in what they believe, and it's not for them wrong. And it is, obviously murder to the Christian. But we always have to understand who we're coming up against. They're still in darkness. They're blinded by darkness. What are you going to expect them to do? Mm-hmm. Right? You can't be shocked by how they react or what they do because they're in darkness. They believe this is a legal thing to do, and they believe it because it's legal makes it right. And that's really dangerous when it comes to law. Just because something is legal does not make it right. And so you got to see it from that angle too. Like I empathize. I'm cautious of that word too. I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with where they're coming from. That's why we stand against this stuff. But you got to understand where they're coming from so that you know how to properly go and talk on that issue or tackle that issue, if you will.
And they will see these pro-lifers as they're trespassing, they're assaulting people, they're disturbing the peace, they seem a bit deranged and trying to close clinics for a few hours. And they're probably thinking, look, if we don't throw the book at these people, how long before they get bold enough to bring some bang bang sticks or boom boom toys to a clinic, right? And we have seen that type of thing happen before. You cannot, as a conservative, say, no, that's never happened before. Well, it has. And so that side of things, they're thinking, I'm not endorsing their thoughts, but just thought experiment for you. They're thinking, we need to show these people that it's wrong to stop access to these clinics.
Right.
And so we're going to keep them locked up. We're going to throw the book at them, try to punish them.
Yes.
That's the government side, the supportive side.
Right.
Now the Williams angle. And I was doing a thought experiment on all of this, and it wasn't the original line I took, but I think it's interesting. So the Williams angle, this is her and what I believe is in her mind or driving her in all of this. That the action of abortion is flat out morally horrendous.
Truth.
It ends the life of children and is grotesque.
Truth.
It doesn't deserve respect, and those who promote it and make it accessible to people are complicit in murder. Would you respect, well, it's private property and people have a right to this, if, and just go with me here.
Walk the line, okay?
Walk this with me. Let's say people were butchering 5-year-olds down the street. Would you stand outside and pray as people led the 5-year-olds into the building? Would you send some money to an organization that might pass a bill in a few years that might restrict how it's done or the age limit of the kids just for the bill to get shot down?
Or 50 years.
Or 50 years? Well, in 50 years, maybe we'll solve this. No. You would find it so morally horrendous that you were willing to shut people's hands and doors and get in people's faces to stop the atrocity. You'd be willing to do just about anything to make the absolutely evil, wicked practice of ending 5-year-olds stop. She's made a career of organizing and protesting these abortion clinics. Mind you, Williams, before she got saved, had 2 abortions and ended up addicted to alcohol and drugs. Then she got saved, transformed her life into a different person. In fact, if we heard that there were people back during the slave trade, if there were people who rioted during slave auctions, and a slave auctioneer's hand got crushed one time and another got shoved down as the protesters did their best to interrupt the slave auction, we might say, well, at least they stood up for trying to stop evil.
That's exactly where that's where the moral conundrum is. It's like, okay, we know the practice of abortion has been since before Roe v. Wade, but
hundreds of years,
right?
Probably thousands.
I think Jefferson even referenced it a couple times about the killing of babies in the womb and that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, evil's existed from the beginning. But you got to start really putting yourself, and this is that toss-up. Is it right? Is it wrong? Morally start to think, okay, at some point, the whole Cortez, is it Quetzalcoatl, Mexico, they go over there.
Just listening about that.
Right, but it's like, you show up with the Spaniards to Mexico in a foreign land, you see all these skulls piled up because of the sacrifice they're doing, and they're like, whoa, what the heck? And so the holy wars or religious wars branded Cortez. Again, you have to see it from their perspective too, right? There's two perspectives. One, Cortez came in and slaughtered everybody and stopped the practice of the wickedness, right? Or slaughtered the people responsible, basically. The other side will say that's what religion does. It creates holy wars and blah, blah, blah. You're stopping their way of life.
Right.
And it's like,
And mind you, Cortez, he had like 400 guys, but he had like 10,000 men from other tribes that were sick of being the human farms for the Aztec sacrifices, right? So like, exactly, at what point does evil become so morally reprehensible that you commit action to stop it, And I'm not justifying what she did.
I think that's what's hard.
That's
no matter what we do, it's going to sound either because I think about these little kids, getting sex changes, when they prepubescent or they're, I'm sorry, teens and stuff like I can't accurately say they're getting sex changes when they're younger than teenage years or fed hormone blockers. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know. But it's like at some point in your heart, you got to go, wait a minute. We can't allow the destruction of little guys and little girls and their bodies and mutilation, dude. At some point, you're like, this is like killing 5-year-olds. Like that analogy you use. At some point, you're like, wait a second. We're allowing the slaughter of babies. When do we step in and say no mas?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's, yeah.
And what lengths do you take? So that 5-year-old example, like, if the government says, if you interfere with this process, we're going to throw you in jail for 5 years. Well, are you at the point where it's morally reprehensible enough that I don't care how many years I get, I'm going to do everything, even if I can stop this only for a couple hours, I'm going to do what I can do. And my guess is that's where Williams is at.
Right.
Is I will do whatever I can do, even if I can only stop it for a couple hours. Right. Now, at the same time, how effective are your means? Right? And I don't know that I've got an answer. Well, it was morally righteous what she did, or God ordained it. I don't know.
But I don't think effectiveness has anything to do with obedience. I think obedience is more important than effectiveness because ultimately the fruit belongs to God, not me, right? So we've heard it in the past being said about us. The views that you guys get on certain channels aren't huge, but this guy is. He must be anointed. You're not. I think that's bullcrap, and I'll tell you why. Because the lives that we affect out there that you don't see is way more important to me than what I do online. Way more important. We didn't put a huge emphasis on our social media. Because to me, it's like that's what everybody does. Everybody runs down that channel. And there's a whole lot of successful ministries and prophets that are false and wrong. So that does not determine success to me, does not determine anointing to me. What determines anointing to me is the breaker. Is what we're saying making an impact in people's lives to get them to repent to the gospel, not to get you to vote for your candidates, not to make your point right. It's really like, are we doing these things to give people the answers they need to make an effective choice for their conscience? Right. What we're saying here is, no matter how we slice and dice this, it's going to sound like A, we're not hitting this hard enough, or B, we're not justifying it. That's the problem with learning morality, like to know your own conscience. And effectiveness really is, I got to say this way. I remember when Michael Peruka preached this once, and I've used this line ever since. When we stand before the Lord one day, he's not going to say, well done, thou good and successful servant. He's going to say, well done, thou good and faithful. Because success doesn't mean anything. I mean, I heard this one sermon, I think it was 10 shekels in a shirt, and I forget the preacher. It was a long time ago. And he said, if you want to look at ministries and their effectiveness, Christ had no one follow him to the cross. But he fed 5,000 or 20,000, if you think women and children, a couple times, and you had all these miracles happen, and nobody followed him to the cross. If you look at success, he went and died for the world, and nobody really followed him. And so you look at success in a different way in numbers, right? And it's not about that. Even his own disciples rejected him. Peter rejecting him 3 times, denying him 3 times. But it was the resurrection after. So really, is it what we do that makes the impact? Or is it the fact that when people begin to see history, they're like, oh man, that guy was the Son of God. Oh shoot, man, maybe Martin Luther King wasn't perfect and everything. Some call him a communist. You know, all these other things. You look at their life and their fruit and you're like, dang, why is it we kill and murder the prophets, but then we write books about them and say they were heroes? You know what I mean? So,
and I think that's where it's tough even with a situation like this, because is she being faithful to what the Lord told her to do, or is she doing what she thinks will be the most effective in stopping stuff? Right?
I don't agree with her pinching someone's hand at a door. I don't.
No, I think defensive violence violence is a situation that is a last resort.
Right.
I agree. Stopping volunteers from walking into the place for a couple hours. Now, maybe some people were changed that day. I hope so. I hope so. But there's also people who are transformed and changed when protesters merely say, "Hey, can we pray with you? We just want to love on you. And we want to show you another way."
And there's plenty of souls that have changed that way. There's plenty of women who have stopped abortion. There's plenty. And I'm not saying that's the only course, but if you're going to do something legally, if you got arrested for simply sitting out there and blocking, I get it, okay? And then you can go to court for it and say, I think this is morally reprehensible, and you can kind of make your case. I think when you hurt other people, that's where it gets a little weird for me.
Yeah.
Because Jesus didn't send me to do that. Our founders were on the defensive. They tried to olive branch. We just went through this in our Constitution course, and you just went through some of this last night with our Constitution course at the church. Olive branch after olive branch was sent. It was being unheeded. And then the king says, you know what? Bounties on your heads. And then they're like, well, now that we're in this, we got to defend ourselves, right? Because at the ports of Boston, that's why it was so heavy, because Boston was like, everybody was on Boston. Mm-hmm. That's where the most crap happened in a lot of ways, right? So that and nobody touched Virginia, really. You know what I mean? It was only when they were in war. So it's like you're seeing they were on the defensive. They weren't on the offensive. They weren't trying to do that. Maybe some fringe people were, but at the end of it all, when we declared independence, it was about defense. We're not getting our rights, blah, blah, blah. So here's where I think where I disagree. It's when you start to physically hurt people in the name of your cause. That's not what Jesus said to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? Be not overcome evil with evil, but overcome evil with good. That's where I think our heart is.
No, and I agree. And I think the reason I did this whole angle thing is so you can see the perspectives of the person.
Truth.
Because if she is so resigned in her mind that, and it's hard to disagree with the concept of this is absolutely morally reprehensible of destroying lives.
Yeah.
Like this is destroying lives, innocent lives.
Right.
Then therefore, shouldn't the measures you take to help stop that process, shouldn't those be commensurate with the action, right?
100%.
The evil is extreme. Well, then maybe you have to take extreme action to stop the evil.
Right.
So you may have noticed that
it was an abrupt cutoff.
I got interrupted because the power went out. So
thank God for
put a
office
bow on
buildings.
this.
That's
Yes.
why you need to support this ministry to get us a better building. Just kidding. But you were actually rounding off a really good point, and what we were doing was what's justifiable. You actually brought up a point when we were talking about during this little snafu, using the analogy of murdering 5-year-olds. We would act
Right.
We all would be like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean?
Take up arms.
Take up arms. Yeah, we got to stop this place, and that's where it gets really sticky, because if we believe all human life is viable, it's God's creation, then why don't we act? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's where it becomes. I think the tricky part is most of these, and I'm not sure. I shouldn't say most. Some of these people that work at these abortion clinics don't really know. Their conscience is not been awakened to this. So you maiming them, right, it may hurt them. There are some who are diabolical, and I think murdering 5-year-olds, that's diabolical. I think that's different. You've crossed the line in your conscience. You know, we get mad at pedophiles for touching kids, and don't believe that they should exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Death penalty for that. You know, I'm very strong on that. So it's like, man, at what point? So it's like you just determine in your conscience. We're saying about this whole story, and I hope I can say this and you round it up, but it's not as cut and dry as it like, oh, it was just a free speech thing. There was more to this. There's deeper things to think about with this. You know what I mean?
And you can't just haul off and get mad at the judge, get mad at the prosecutors and all of that, that somehow, some way, they're just evil people that are throwing the book at her. There was more to this. She had a history of it. She obviously, it was not her standing on the sidewalk praying silently and holding a sign saying, "We want to help you. Don't do this."
Right.
She was in people's faces. She was confrontational. She was stopping people from getting into the clinics, shut somebody's hand in a door or crushed it or whatever, however you want to call it. And our point here is, when you think through these things, it's very important to not just haul off in action of passion. You've got to know what you're doing, the Lord has called you to do. And that difference matters, because did the Lord tell her, you need to get extreme on this? You need to get a hair's width of violence in this. Or is the Lord put on her heart, you need to be going to this, but she went 2 steps further, as opposed to praying and seeking out the people who are going in and providing protest to it in a peaceable way. There's a difference.
No, there is. And I think too, like even as ministers, we can get our opinion kind of messed up in all this. Our opinions can get all screwed up and skewed, and we can throw that into a sermon. And for that, I mean, if I've ever done that, I really apologize, because I don't want to do that. So you got to know what the Lord is telling you and what the Lord's giving to you personally. Not telling you what to tell the people. What is he giving you personally? And I fear a lot of people do that. They'll put their opinions in a sermon and make people obey that. I think that's what's really hard, especially as ministers. And you just got to know: am I preaching the gospel here? Is it my word? So a lot of these podcasts we do, we get you to think. When we do podcasts on, like I did one on Amos, and I did one on several, just different Bible characters and what they were talking about. It gets you to, it's provoking. It's provoking you to thought. Am I walking in holiness? Am I, is the same thing happening back then that happened in America? And you can see the similarities, and all of it is repentance. We need to make sure we're clean before God. Same thing here. Don't just endorse things to endorse things. Really think your position through. Just because it shows it on social media that she's a hero, what if she's not? What if there's more to this story that we don't even know? You know what I mean? Just be careful what you're seeing out there.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much, guys. We appreciate it. And like Massey was saying, we're not always going to give you the answer.
Word.
We're going to help you think it through. We're going to help you weigh it out. So you may not come to the same conclusion as we do, as other listeners do, and that's okay. As long as you're seeking the Lord in faith of, Lord, how would you want me to do this? How do you want me to handle this?
Right.
What is your heart, your character in all of this? So, guys, go to theselfevidenttruth.com, get yourself some resources, some merch, and by all means, you still have a chance to sign up for the burgers thing.
Yeah.
That's Thursday. So we'll be there on Thursday.
theselfevidenttruth.com. You guys want to come out? I'll be speaking for about 25 minutes. And you'll see more of the heart of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So it's going to be awesome, and we would just love to see you there. So
Yep. All right. Love you guys. Have a great day.